So I'm working on a particular book right now, The Nature and Ways of Being Human. And it's about what's the truth of being human? What's actually the deepest part of being human? And then how do our ways come out of that? And do our ways reflect the truth? Because wholeness or integrity is when two sides of an equation are equal. So the truth of being and the ways of being. And wholeness is when the ways of your being, your behaviors and choices, actually are expressions of the truth of your being. So it might sound a lot of complication, but it's a lot simpler than that. I'm also working on 6 other book projects at the same time. I'm working on learning the art of living in each moment's grace, learning how to stay present, not be a future tripper, creating imaginations that don't exist. And then the sequel for The Shack, which I never thought I'd write, but I ended up with friendships with a bunch of guys on death row. And that opened up a storyline, because I have a serial killer in The Shack, and who's going to end up on death row somewhere. So that's fun and wrenching and all of that. Stories from The Shack, just a compilation of some of the stories that I've collected along the way. Amazing things, actually. Then a compilation, which is, I'm calling it right now, Diamond Shards on a Dusty Road, and bits and pieces from all sorts of places. I've got autobiography that I have already started working on, which has been requested by some of the publishers. So that's turning out to be a beautiful thing as well. And then way in the background somewhere is a science fiction book that's been sitting there for attention for like 15 years. Right now, both Crossroads and Eve are on the docket. So it's really early for major motion pictures, or Crossroads might become a serial. I'm not sure. And then out of Germany right now, there is I'm working on the libretto with an American soprano, Janet Zvatal, on a musical stage production for The Shack. So lots of little projects. In the meantime, working on putting together a central place where people can find the stuff that I've done or am working on, and a calendar and all those things that folks have been asking me for a long time to provide, and I'm getting some help. So we have friends putting that together. And then a nonprofit to help the kind of work that I do get amplified, and the kind of work that there are folks like Bradley Jerzak, like Baxter Kruger, like John McMurray are trying to get this kind of good news into the world that we want to help. So, trying to think if there's anything else. Still traveling, being with folks, one-on-one, small groups, and big conferences, that kind of stuff. So, and I have 16 grandchildren. So that's occupying my time mostly. The big word is ontology. And I'm using it in a very specific sense, and some of the experts might have a problem with how I'm using it. But ontos is the word for being, and logos is the word for words about or study of. So it's the study of being. And really, it's getting at what is the truth of your being? What's the deepest sort of thing? What is underlying all the trauma and the damage and the addictions, and what is down there? What do we draw from as human beings? And, I've mentioned before that I've got friends on death row in Tennessee. And when I talk to them, none of them want to be a killer. None of them want to be someone who lies. None of them want to be evil. They are there for lots of different reasons. Sometimes it's the ineptitude of the justice system. Sometimes, obviously some of them are guilty, but some of them are not and have bad representation. They were on the poor side of town. And not all court appointed lawyers are lax. Some of them are just super under the weight of all of their cases, and some of them are just not good at what they do. And so people end up with disparate kinds of sentences. And again, I haven't met one of them. The only time you'll meet somebody who cannot draw from the deepest longings of their heart are those who are mentally ill or have been so damaged that they can't reach down that deep. And that's become their identity, something broken. In the way I grew up inside a very conservative evangelical religious world, we were told that the truth of your being is like Luther said, you are snow-covered dung. And I like to refer to that as piece of theology, that the deepest truth of your being is that you're a piece of crap. And, in my trauma, in my relationship with my dad, that got communicated really early. Tears apart the human soul and communicates that, you're only worthy of being used. So the truth of your being is slaughtered by the time you get to anywhere where you can fight against that. And especially if God also believes that that's the truth of your being, what hope is there? My dad and I have a troubled history. That's putting it mildly. He was he grew up in the wilds of the coast of British Columbia as a logger and a hunter and a real pioneer kind of person in a pioneer kind of family. Kind of in the middle of a pack of 10 kids. He didn't have a chip for being a dad. That had been busted in him before I ever showed up. And I'm the firstborn of the family. And his dad was a cruel man, and his grandfather was a cruel man. They made some horrendous decisions in their life that were incredibly harmful. And my oldest aunt would talk to me about how my dad's father would just knock him across the room, and she would say, "Why did you do that?" And it was because I can. And that's the world my dad came out of. He was an abusive disciplinarian. And I didn't know his history. I just knew that I was terrified of him. And that was a constant thing until I was out. And I got out of the house as soon as I could, 16, and I was out. And my dad lived until he was 92. And our relationship was difficult. There was no sense of a personal connection. My dad rarely called me. Actually, most of my life, in terms of him, initiated a conversation like by telephone. There were 3 of them. All tragedies, all started with, "Paul, there's something that I need to tell you." One was the death of my brother. He was 18. One was when my sister got pregnant out of wedlock, which was, a tragedy in our religious community. And one was the death of my 5-year-old niece the day after her 5th birthday. 3 phone calls. And so I initiated, of course, I forgave him, but I now understand forgiveness in ways that I didn't then. My dad and I didn't really start reconciliation until he turned 80. On his 80th birthday, I was up in British Columbia. It was like, his birthday's on December 10th. And snow on the ground. It was really cold. And my dad blew up the party, as he normally did. And I was really angry. So I went for a walk. Didn't even have a coat. Didn't feel the cold. I was hot enough. Went for this walk, and I could feel the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit going on the walk with me. And none of us were talking. So I was just angry. And for quite a while, we just walked. And then I kind of feel the arm of God, Papa God, around my shoulder. Now, I've never heard God speak audibly to me. I know that I really believe that every human being has a unique way of communication, whether it's in pictures or nudges, or I have friends who've heard God speak audibly, but not me. Mine is very internally conversational. I really believe that God dwells within our imagination, our logic, our experience, our relationships, our creativity, our work, and God has the capacity to speak in any of those ways. Mine's very conversational, and I hear Papa God say, Paul, you know your father hasn't known how to be a father for 60 years. He's not suddenly going to figure it out. And I said, yeah, I get that. And then I hear something that, it should have been encouraging and lovely. I hear Papa God say, if it's okay with you, I will be all that to you and more. And it's like, no, it's not enough. I want my dad to love me like this. My dad's 80 years old at the time, and I'm almost 60 years old at the time. And then I realized something. My dad didn't know how to be a relational person. He just didn't. And when he would blow things up, it was because it's like I'd led him onto a field that I had planted mines, my expectations. I walked into a scenario, a situation, a party, like his 80th birthday, and I had planted mines that he didn't know where they were. And eventually he stepped on one and he blew things open. So it was my expectations that were keeping him in this place. And I decided that I had to let him be free from my expectations. Did he ever be the dad that I wanted? And it was a crazy thing. I actually let him become something more, not something less. And the something more was I let him become a human being. Because a human being is a greater reality than being a dad. Being a dad is a subcategory of being human. Not everybody gets to be a dad, right? And things started to change. Because when I let him be a human being, suddenly his story mattered to me. Suddenly I was able to listen to him in a way that I hadn't been able to listen to him before because I had all these expectations. I also realized that in my inside house, I kept two photo albums. One of all the bad, dumb things that he had done and said and harmed me, right? So that when I had these expectations and he blew things up, I could go to my photo album and I could say, look, he's the same son of a that he's always been. And I could show you photos and photos. But I had this other photo album that I didn't want to look at. It was in some dusty cabinet in my inside house. And it was photos of things that he had done that were actually good. But those photos violated this photo album. And this is the one where I was stuck. And I wanted to prove, look. But this one, the times that he had helped people at great cost to himself, the times that he had been harmed, the times that he was a good storyteller. Kids loved his stories. Good things. The times he'd loved my mom, right? The times he'd made good decisions. And so I started opening up that photo album. And I took him outside the box or the walls of this photo album because he was stuck there. And I was stuck there and was around this issue of expectations. I wanted him to be punished. And so I let go of the expectations and started treating him as a human being. And I discovered that when you learn to live without expectations, everything becomes a gift. Expectations are just prophesied disappointments. Disappointment's just waiting to happen. And my dad started to become a human being and started to be somebody who mattered. And things started happening. He called me a couple times. We didn't know how to talk very well, and it didn't go very deep very fast. But over some time, because he died at 92, so there were like 12 years in there. And we started like struggling to find language that we both could enter into, but I didn't punish him when he wasn't able to be, because he was a human being. He had a history. He had damage. He didn't know. And he started, I asked him, Dad, every time we talk, I want to ask you a question, one that I've always wondered, but I've never been like brave enough. And before he died, I was able to ask him one question. I asked him why he married Mom. And he told me the answer truthfully. And it was sad because it wasn't out of love, but he didn't know how. And I'm listening to this human being, this man, tell me. And it answered a whole bunch of questions for me. A couple weeks before he died, a month and a half before he died, I called him because I was still the one mostly calling. And he started about a minute into the conversation. He says, Paul, there's something I need to tell you. Great. Because that's always how tragedy conversations started, the same words. And I go, Dad, yeah? He says, no, you need to listen to me. I need you to hear what I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, okay. He said, Paul, listen. I need you to know that I'm really, really, really proud of you. I'm proud of the man you've become. I'm proud of the father you are. I'm proud of the husband you are. I'm proud of the ways that you've impacted the world. And I really, really, really love you. If I'd had expectations about that, I would have said, well, it's damn time. But I didn't. I let those go. And so this becomes one of the most precious gifts in my life. He never said anything like that. And now it was on his heart to say that. And it was an incredible gift because it was not the meeting of an expectation. It was the kindness between two human beings. And he was able to tell me. And so my dad started rough, but he finished well. And yeah, I grieve. My depth of my grief for my dad's absence is as deep as the relationship it was. I don't grieve for the loss of expectations now, thankfully. But my dad occupied a space in my life, and that space has become precious. And so that space is not gone. It's just that I'm learning to live a life in which that space is kept as a precious place. Could we have lived our lives differently? Oh, yeah. Could he have made less mistakes? Oh, yeah. Could I have made less mistakes? Oh, yeah. But it's not about that. It's about how do we forgive? And it was the letting go of those expectations that became my understanding of the depth of forgiveness and my ability to then move forward inside of that relationship with no agenda. I didn't need my dad to say that anymore. But when he did, it was a gift.